Welcome to the session Data Integration with Enterprise Applications. In this session, we are going to focus very much on how Data Hub can help and how typical scenarios around enterprise applications and the integration of those can look like. And I will give a few examples and show you also a bunch of stuff in the system, how that could be realized. My name is Marc Hartz. I'm basically heading the product management team for Data Hub and Data Intelligence. The rough flow we envisioned is, first of all, bring everybody on the same page, and then focus really on a lot of the scenarios which could be built either directly in the system or by a few scenarios I have prepared. So I will make the introduction a little bit longer in the beginning. I will show directly stuff in the system that you are able to follow, and then we jump very specifically deeper and deeper in scenarios with Celonis, with SAC, with C4HANA. So I will show you a bunch of scenarios how things could look like. But I will leave all the marketing blah blah away and will directly jump into the technical details. What is Data Hub about, right? And this is usually my, I like this slide usually to explain what we are basically doing. So Data Hub is a product and has been built to cover challenges in integration, in management of metadata and visibility of governance in a diverse landscape. And when I say a diverse landscape, I mean scenarios where you have always, let's say, a mixture of, on the one hand side, maybe structured applications, like hopefully a lot of SAP applications, like ABAP-based systems, like a BW system, like a HANA system. But also on the other side, a lot of the, let's say, from our perspective, of the external world. And that could be a variety of things. That could be streaming technologies like message queues, like Kafka or MQTT or NUTS or whatever is out there. It could be cloud storages like Azure Data Lake, like S3, like Google Cloud Store, and so on. And it could, of course, be Hadoop systems like HDFS as a file systems up to APIs and databases, right? So the whole product is basically built in a way that we offer these different services in basically scenarios where we are crossing basically these two worlds, right? Always where you have scenarios like read from a Kafka queue, write it into Azure Data Lake, push it into BW. That would be a prime scenario, basically, of what we are doing. And we split the product in basically three parts. You see in the middle there, at the core, and I would show that right away that everybody can follow, is basically this pipelining solution, where we offer predefined operations to build what we call a data pipeline. And a data pipeline is now touching many parts of such a scenario. And it's executing this logic, and it's orchestrating also the logic where, let's say, the data is residing. Easy example would be you have data in Hadoop, and you do not want to move petabyte out there. You would like to process it. So you would be able to build a pipeline in a way that the Spark code is delegated and executed directly in Hadoop, for example. In the BW, it could be done via process chains. It could interact directly with info provider and query information, right? So this is what mainly is this pipelining and processing about. It's really about fetching the data, bringing it to the right place, doing the job to be done, transforming, processing with integrated things out of the box, and then having a common monitoring and common orchestration on top of that, where you can also see what is happening in the system, what are the attached processes, and how does that basically look like. The third pillar is what we call the data governance part, where we have an Explorer, a metadata catalog, where we are fetching metadata information from all of the, let's say, attached systems, and we understand the semantics, the structure, and the data quality of it. Again, easy example, you have a HANA database, and within this HANA database, you have a bunch of table and a calc view. So we would fetch the information from this table and the calc view. We would store this metadata in this catalog, and we would then know, okay, that is what, how for example, the different columns are looking like, and how the data quality of this HANA table is looking like. Okay, so these are roughly the 3 areas. Just to mention, because I see also a few faces which were in my introduction session like 15 minutes ago, there we talked also about data intelligence. And just for everybody, data intelligence is now using Data Hub and adding machine learning functionalities on top. That's the only difference those 2 things are having. And of course, we will also align the messaging and the naming over time. But for now, you can remember it's actually the same functionality we are offering in both. Data Hub is a complete containerized solution. That means we are using Kubernetes as an infrastructure to deploy the solution. So everything you will see in there is basically built as a Docker container, deployed via Kubernetes. And then you can use any infrastructure of your choice from a public cloud like Azure or AWS or Google, up to on-premise installations with Red Hat, SUSE, Cisco, Lenovo, whoever basically have such a distribution. So from our side, that's completely open. Plus, we are offering that product as a service within Cloud Platform, and that's exactly what is called data intelligence. It's just the service in Cloud Platform with some machine learning functionality. But this is not the purpose of the session, so we are jumping into, let's say, the enterprise scenarios. For that, again, just to bring everybody on the same page, we jump now into each of these 3 buckets, highlight roughly what it does, and then we jump basically in the demo and in the different basically parts there. The Metadata Explorer, like I mentioned it before, and there is a dedicated hands-on session where you can also use it and where you can also build a governance scenario, is exactly built, like I said, about crawling and fetching the metadata of these individual systems. That means it has connectivity, and we are offering with Data Hub connectivity out of the box to all of these systems you saw before. And again, in this session here, we will highlight especially all the, let's say, enterprise applications. So we will talk about how we do this for ABAP, we will talk about how we do this for Fieldglass, for Concur, C4HANA, and so on. And once such a connection is being established, we can fetch the metadata from a whatever OData interface, API, depending on the solution. We put it in this catalog, and then we provide the services you see in blue on top of that. And an easy service would be discovering of the data. So understanding the data quality, discover how is the underlying data asset looking like. Searching, so meaning just for search, show me all of my customer system, all of my customer data in a system. And then a very needed functionality is to trace basically the lineage of this data. So to show where's the data coming from and where is it going to understand if I have data from a data lake and I want to consume that in an analytical solution, that I also understand where's this data coming from. Plus what we call business rules, where you have the possibility to create rules and checkpoints on top of this data to see also, is this data applying to a certain quality understanding? Are the columns filled? Is there an outlier? And that you then also can get an idea how to solve that as well. In the orchestration and monitoring, everything we do will be looking like such a process, like such a pipeline, and we have a central management of that. That means there is a central way how you first of all can maintain all of the connectivity by providing user credentials and so on, and then based on this connectivity you can reuse basically that assets and can use that for connectivity and data processing. Once that is done, such a workflow could be established, which is now basically a scheduling, right? You could schedule your process chains in BW, your data flows and data services, your flow graphs in HANA, your Spark jobs in Hadoop, and have one monitoring here, which is basically looking like that, where you then also see what is going on and which job is breaking, where do I have problems, and is something going wrong, and if yes, which component, right? That is basically this orchestrating and monitoring, which is again, meant to be understanding the landscape and monitoring it, right? The data pipeline and processing, that is now the core thing of what we do. That is, in every session you will visit, you will basically see that thing. And you have seen that even Jürgen Müller basically showed exactly that screen in the keynote with data intelligence. That's exactly what the core of the solution is. For that, you have to understand that such a pipeline can be understood of a, let's say, of a flow-based application. That means it consists out of course, data we are processing, either physically or virtually, meaning if the data is in Hadoop and you delegate via Spark, Data Hub will never touch the data, right? Hadoop will do it. If you build a transformation in Data Hub, the data will also go to Data Hub. So you have many different options how you can build that in also an efficient way to delegate processing of this whole thing. The units itself you are seeing there are called operators. That are now the operations which are basically defined out of the box. That means we defined operators out of the box for connectivity to databases, the cloud stores, and so on, but also for processing, like for joining, projections, anonymization, cleansing activities. So you will find predefined operators like that, which you can drag and drop basically together, and it will indicate you with this connection bubbles there if the data types are basically compatible with each other or not. As we speak, we have roughly around 250 operators out of the box doing everything and a lot of different things, like I said, from transformation, but also to some machine learning activities like training a TensorFlow model, applying OpenCV on a bunch of pictures. So that is basically everything we can see in there. The whole thing is scalable, as we, like I mentioned in the beginning shortly, we are using Docker technology and Docker images and Kubernetes to scale. That means once such a process is being scheduled, we will start and stop operators, and that also means containers in the end as we go, right? So if you have now here 6 operators, it might be that we start up 6 Docker containers orchestrated by Kubernetes to process the data. And once that is not needed anymore, we shut them down. And with that, you are highly scalable. Because in that example, it's now super easy example. It's moving a bunch of structured data around. But let's imagine it's a machine learning scenario. So one of this icon would be a TensorFlow model. Then you would not like to spin up 1 container, but maybe 1,000. Because a machine learning model is usually resource intensive, and you would like to scale that in an efficient way. And that would be the vehicle how you could do that. Everything you see here is reusable. That means once such an operator is basically available, it can be reused and it can be brought basically together with different other solutions, right? Exactly, that should be enough 15 minutes for everybody to be on the same page. So we talked about pipelining, metadata, connectivity. I would show that all in the systems. And we would now especially jump into the parts which are now application specific. And application specific is now exactly also the part how we as SAP think we can differentiate with the solution Data Hub also to other, let's say, products out in the market. By understanding metadata, by offering delta replication out of the box, and by keeping the semantics of the different systems you are basically seeing there. So what we will do now within the next 30 minutes is we jump in each and every bucket and discuss how that is looking like and how we are basically doing that. And the one thing which is completely new, which we just released also for TehcEd, and which is completely new and shown also in a hands-on session here, is that we have one, let's say, new way how we can connect, and we call it ABAP-based systems, but basically ABAP-based means ERP and BW in first place, right? And that means we leverage also functionality which you might know already by SLT, by SAP LT Replication Server as a product, where we were able to replicate NetWeaver-based data to whatever HANA or a database. So we use that now as a functionality again, you can guess, containerized it and put it into Data Hub. And with that, we have one framework how we completely can handle the let's say the integration with those ABAP-based systems. And the 3 dimensions you have to understand, or which I believe are very important for us, is one of all, with this Explorer, meaning with this catalog I showed you before, that we understand the metadata of an ABAP system. And my favorite example I make every day is think about an object in an ERP system, like a material, a sales order, whatever. It usually consists out of a few tables, right? And when you now replicate, or when you would like to provide these tables to someone, and let's assume you want to provide all of your ERP data to an Azure data lake that a data science team can pick it up. Then usually you do not want to provide each and every table individually, but you would like to provide the whole object sales order to them. Because there will be a poor guy refactoring basically what is the sales order and have to understand what is a sales order and how does this 5 tables relate to each other. So what we mean with this metadata is exactly that we are able to keep that semantics, that we are able to keep the knowledge and basically transport it into our catalog, and that you then can search for, show me all my sales orders, and we understand, okay, this are now these 5 tables which you need, and we do basically this magic already for you. The provisioning part is now exactly what SLT also did, meaning replicating the data, transferring the data. That means with that functionality, you could replicate now ERP tables or CDS views into, for example, a data lake out of the modeling environment of Data Hub. And I come to that in a second, how that exactly looks like. The second and the third piece is that there are also scenarios, what we learned with customers, where you process something in Data Hub, and now you would like to execute some logic, for example, in ABAP, like calling a function module or triggering something. That means we have out-of-the-box functionality how you could exactly do that. And that is, if you zoom into that, it's exactly these 3, let's say, functional parts. It's on the one hand side, the semantic knowledge I referred to. SAP has a lot of different ways to express this semantic knowledge. In the BW days, there were the famous extractors. In the S4 days, there are now CDS views that are basically semantic-rich objects. And this is exactly what we connect to and then support basically initial loads and then turn this into a delta upload. Like I said again, if you have a scenario S4 data into Azure Data Lake, that would be exactly the way how you could do that. You would get delta uploads, and you could do that on the whole object level instead of the single table levels. The operator for, let's say, execute ABAP logic, like I said, that could be a function module. I think that is more or less self-complaining. Explaining. I will show you in a second how that exactly looks like. For existing SLT customers, we have a connectivity. So, for example, that SLT can replicate directly into Data Hub, and we hand over the data and transport it further, which has a few release restrictions and release, let's say, prerequisites, but actually we can connect to each and every system which is there and have integration scenarios. So if you now put that, and I said we will always have an example, it would basically look like that. And you see on the right-hand side Data Hub, the version which this ABAP functionality is contained is 2.7. That's the version we just released. And I forget it in my jet lag either this week or next week, but I'm not in the office, so I do not know. But I think it's the next week. We are just releasing the latest version. We are right now with 2.6, and that will contain this ABAP icons and this ABAP operators you are seeing there. And the whole thing is built in a way, like many of you know also from the SLT product itself, that we have a package which is called DEMIS, right? That's the source package you have to install in the ERP system, and many of the customer systems do have that already or are using that even. And that is our, let's say, sender, and we have then a receiver on the Data Hub side where we then have a communication between exactly this DEMIS package, the operator within Data Hub. We establish a communication, and then we can replicate, for example, the data exactly like I mentioned, and the scenario could look like replicate my data from a certain area of my S4 or my ERP system and then bring it into any supported target by Data Hub, which again could be anything we are supporting in Data Hub. It could be any cloud store, could be any database, could be a BW system, it could be basically anything. This is, by the way, one of the top use cases we see in our installed base. So nearly every customer has such a requirement or such a scenario, and this is a very, very easy way for us to basically support that. Should we do questions afterwards? Would that be okay? Then we have enough time to go through all of that. From a, let's say, and of course there are a lot of systems which are not, let's say, only ABAP specific, but we do also have, let's say, a lot of cloud applications. Like Concur, like Field Class, like SuccessFactors. And a common issue is that it's hard also to connect to those applications because they have a different understanding of a business partner. They have different ways how they expose the data. So what we came up with, and that was an effort together with our colleagues from BW, so from the data warehousing side, was a possibility how we can, let's say, expose the data from these cloud applications in a common and in a useful way. So what we did is we defined basically extractors, BW extractors, if you so will, for each and every of these, let's say, solutions, which is right now available for Concur and for Field Class already. That means we are offering within the solution itself an OData API, which is representing, for example, a certain, let's say, business object, and we can basically connect to that. So does BW. So that the idea is that this concept is being shared among many of those, let's say, applications. And then we can use and we can get delta uploads, we can fetch metadata, and we have a common interface and a common protocol for basically all of that solutions, right? And that is how it will, how it's basically looking like. That means once you have created such, let's say, such a connectivity within our connectivity interface, you can basically use. So you would have down on the left-hand side such an operator which can connect to, for example, Field Class. You get a drop-down box where you can select which API and which object you would like to fetch and which you like to use. And then you basically would process it. And in this example, we are fetching Field Class data. We are anonymizing it. That is basically what is happening down here. We are masking the data, and then we are writing it. Basically, we are using one of our own engines, but again, we could now write it to S3, to ADL, to Google Cloud Store, to HANA, to BW, and we could basically integrate the data in there. For BW, it's, and that is a core thing, and I have to say it's not BW anymore, so you also have seen Data Warehouse Cloud as a big announcement, as a product, and it's actually, for us, exactly the same. It's very transparent for us that we integrate on many different areas. One area is having a predefined, let's say, way how we orchestrate and we structure processes, that we can execute process chains from a Data Hub perspective, and now also in BW for HANA, you will find a functionality that BW can call Data Hub. We have a predefined way how we do data transfers. Again, typical scenario is give me some data from BW and bring it, for example, in a data lake. What we would have here is a predefined way how we can exactly do that. Based on a query level, based on an ODP level, which is the framework to receive basically data there. And then with BW, it's usually the two scenarios, either to load data from a data lake into BW or from vice versa, from BW into a data lake, either for tiering or to have a redundant data set there to, let's say, to keep the data for example, data science purposes. And before we jump into the system, one word, and again, example how that could look like for HANA and Analytics Cloud. And this is now exactly how it would look like for Data Warehouse Cloud. So right after TehcEd, I will extend that. I will also write there Data Warehouse Cloud because it's exactly the same. So we would have basically predefined connectivity that we can push into Analytics Cloud. We could push into HANA, or vice versa. We could fetch HANA tables and we could bring it into, let's say, again, a data lake or a cloud store and so on. And we would use different ways for that. They all have certain, let's say, advantages or disadvantages. And then a typical scenario would like you are taking basically HANA data, you are bringing it into a data lake, and then you are replicating or you are federating data with smart data access, for example, and you have a scenario which is basically a closed loop, and you would have a possibility how you can connect that also into both directions. So before we come to the big and to the complex demo, let me show you the stuff we just went through, and let's explore how that is basically looking like. So I demonstrate this now on a data intelligence system, which is, like I said, exactly the same as Data Hub, just a cloud service that is now a managed cloud service running on AWS in Frankfurt, offered via cloud platform, right? And you see here our typical launchpad. This is how you access the different services. This is the main entry point basically to the different applications. This are itself, again, images, Docker containers, or whole application. That's a bunch of images which are behind each and every of this application. And there are different ways to explore here. So typical, what you would start with is basically get, let's say, connectivity established to the different systems. You have here one way how you can create that. You can, of course, store your credentials there, username. We have user propagation right now, which is being built. And you see here different connectivity types out of the box. Whether this is now this ABAP way I mentioned before, remember when we used then the, let's say, this ABAP engine I mentioned before, or whether we have this cloud data integration API, which would be down here. But you see already that everything which I showed you before, which has difference how it's performing, it's implemented in a, let's say, consistent way, in a, let's say, everything is always the same user experience, whether it's a BW system or whether HANA or whether it's an API, right? And this varies from exactly the databases to the cloud stores, to HANA, HTTP, API, Kafka. This is our own machine learning service, for example, in the cloud. And with that set of connectivity, you can basically connect to nearly everything. So I have barely seen a POC or a project where we had to say, nah, that's nearly impossible, because with the API, with OData, with HTTP, nowadays you can get everything. The predefined connectivity, like for Oracle database, that is then just much easier to use because it's predefined. We know then the specifics of Oracle database, like give me a schema, give me credentials in a certain way, right? So this is why we have both possibilities, either the technical interfaces or the way that we say, okay, we go to an Oracle database via JDBC or ODBC, right? That's in the end the main difference. Once this connectivity is created, and you see here in our demo system, we have a bunch of stuff there. We have such a cloud data API here with C4HANA. We have more or less a few ABAP systems. So behind that, you see basically ERP systems or an S4HANA cloud system. There are a few data lakes and Hadoop file stores, S3 and Azure Data Lake, and so on. And on every connection I have now created here, I do have now the possibility to use that. That means that's reusable. Once I have defined that, I can use that in the different applications. And jumping into exactly this modeling environment, which you see here, that is now the pipeline environment. And sorry for the resolution. It's very tiny here on my screen. It's basically all the applications are connected. They share the same connectivity, they share the same objects, and so on. And for example, in this pipeline environment, you see here now the pipeline which is created. And this is now an example how a push to Analytics Cloud could look like. So you read a file, for example, you read a file. In this example, it's a S3 file we are reading. You see here also from the connectivity way, and I can't scroll to here. Here would actually be a button somewhere. And this, which I can't, let me see if I, which I can't access right now. Because here would be a drop down where you can select the connectivity you basically maintained before, right? And what it then does is it takes the data from S3, which could be now a bunch of CSV files, OSC files, Parquet or whatever. It does some decoding, meaning it brings it into, and you see that we are transforming now the CSV data into a certain format, and then we are inserting it via an import connection into SRC. Right? That means it pushes the data to HANA within Analytics Cloud, and does that in a real-time way. So it's micro-batching what we do. So if your input is an S3 bucket, every time a new file would occur in the S3 bucket, we would push the result to Analytics Cloud. Right? In Analytics Cloud, you would have a dashboard which is exactly showing that. And that is exactly the same for Data Warehouse Cloud, right? So it would exactly work in the same way. It's a prime example. We would just have to make another logo here, which we probably do. On the left-hand side here, you see all of this functionality out of the box. Like I mentioned, you could now search for whatever, Oracle, or we set ABAP systems, where you have a connectivity to that. We could search to, for example, BW, and if I now would do, don't ask me, if we now, for example, choose BW here, again, you could choose the connectivity, and once you have done that, you could basically have here a visual mapping that should remind you from a BW perspective now very much to a transformation that's exactly looking in the same way, where you could now map basically source and target. And with that, you would have within this one operator, an operation, you would have one basically object which represents bring data from BW into a data lake and transform it on that. And that is exactly how you would basically do that. What else did we mention? We mentioned, no, we did not mention that, but we mentioned the cloud data integration. That is now the API I mentioned before. Also here, I can't scroll there. Also here you would now see somewhere down there if it's a Concur or a field class system. Let me see if I can scroll. There's a scroll button. The resolution is horrible. So you could now here set basically the source. Again, select the connectivity. Once this basically is being set, and once you have choose now, okay, a field class system, you also see you would have now, depending on what the source is delivering, either a delta or a full upload, right? And again, from a user experience, those operators all behave the same, right? Depending on which basically object you use and what you do. The same is true from a metadata perspective, like I mentioned before. Let me just jump into this Metadata Explorer. This is now our, like I said, the cataloging solution, where you have an entry point to either on the left-hand side, you see it browse through the connected systems I showed you before. So if I choose there, you will now see the different systems. So you will see, for example, the C4HANA system we saw before via OData, right? You see the BW system which was connected. You see the ABAP systems on top. You see Qualtrics we prepared for the keynote. You see S3. You see all of the different things from a connectivity point of view we had in there before. And you could now jump into each and every of those. Could browse basically what is there, like for example, we browse now into this bucket, and then you see already within this bucket, and this is now the bucket we are using for our hands-on session. So all of the content there is being used at the moment somewhere in a hands-on session, where you see we have some Salesforce data, we have a sales forecast, which I would show in a second in a more holistic demo, and I can get already an understanding of this data. For example, here I have now a set of opportunities. I can jump into that and I get already an understanding how is that basically looking like. I could profile that now to get a quality understanding, which would generate me a few KPIs, how this is basically looking like in general. And again, true for all of the connectivities we are basically supporting. Okay, so far from a, let's say, more introduction and an overview point of view, the next category, and I mentioned that before, would be everything around non-SAP, where we do not have, let's say, certain semantics and so on. And that would exactly be the connectivity I showed you before to the cloud stores, to Hadoop, streaming, and so on and so forth. And there we are supporting, in the meanwhile, a variety of connectivity out of the box. This is depending on customer requests. So when we have 2 customers asking for Redshift, we might build Redshift if we have 5 customers asking for it. So we prioritize that based on customer request. Redshift is now, for example, something which is popping up quite often. SQL data warehouse in Azure is something we have now in the making. Snowflake connectivity. So that is really, it's not a closed SAP solution where we only have the SAP solutions. It's really meant to be open and to have also connectivity out of the box to all of basically these different solutions. If this is not possible, so meaning if it's not possible to have something out of the box, we are supporting a bunch of, let's say, possibilities to extend that on your own or by partners. So there are a bunch of, let's say, engines within Data Hub where you then can go and can write Go, where you can get Go, write Go, or Java or Python or R, where you can extend that basically by your own, right? And write your own connectivity, or use the different SDKs we are shipping and we are using by our own, and use that and to extend that. And that is now luckily something we see a lot. So especially in this third-party connectivity, we see also a bunch of partners and also customers building now something like that on your own. And if you see again, and I forget the whole architecture, it's not important. The important pieces are the extension points. So there are certain ways how you can now extend that by your own. And these extension points are, on the one hand side, if something is not there, you can always, and that's the very left-hand side from your perspective, you can always create a own, let's say, Docker image, which represents basically the logic you would like to wrap in there. You can always write, and that is in this pipeline box, you can always write custom code and operators to connect, for example, to a database we are not supporting. You could always deliver a template for other people in your company that they can reuse basically what you have, let's say, what you have built. And we are also planning, and this is now not currently in the system, but we are working on an SDK that you can write your own, let's say, connectivities, or in the end, whole applications. And we did that, for example, with also our colleagues from SAP IT, and they had a scenario which was looking like that. So they had a typical lead-to-cache scenario where they had data from typical structured sales data from ERP, from BW, from a CRM system, and the goal was to bring that in Celonis to do data mining. And on that way, it was necessary to combine that, to join a few data sets together, to bring that on the same level. So what we built basically with them was exactly this scenario here, where we use the connectivity I showed you before, connect to the ABAP systems, connect to a C4HANA system out of the box via the different interfaces. Then we basically extract the data. We transform it via, and you see we did that here, via HANA and via SQL. We anonymized the data because we are talking here about sales data, GDPR, and all of that stuff. So we have possibilities out of the box here within this operator here in the middle to anonymize it, meaning to demask, to scramble data, so that you can also work with that. And then we built basically a custom way how this could be pushed into Celonis, and then data mining basically happens there, right? And this is, for example, this Celonis operator is now the first open source content we are offering for download via a marketplace. So there is a marketplace which is called the Business Content Hub, and within this Business Content Hub, if you search for Data Hub, I know a lot of hubs, you see basically this content there for download. You can import that in your system, and then you could also use that. And it is also true for IoT functionality and for certain machine learning functionality, where we will go basically down this path. And to prepare the, let's say, the bigger demo, the last part of this, let's say, big picture was the part down here, where we do have a lot of functionality within our cloud platform already, whether it's the API hub, where we are collecting certain APIs, whether it's what we call the open connectors, how you can fetch connectivity to other sources like Salesforce, for example, or where you have cloud platform data integration, so CPI, and that is exactly what I would like to also start with, where the first question after the overview session an hour ago was, is Data Hub replacing CPI? That was the first question. I said, no, it's a complete different thing. They are doing complete different things. So we are operating on different levels. CPI, so PI on-premise, CPI in the cloud, is doing app-to-app workflows, right? Business workflows. So what they have is an object which is called iFlow. This is how you trigger, for example, something in SuccessFactors or in an ABAP system. So that's a workflow perspective. So what we basically have built is the integration with that. And that's a very easy example we basically built with them together, which was a demo we show also here at TehcEd, where we use image recognition. So we identify the name on a ticket, and based on the name of the ticket, we are hitting a process which is then running in a CRM to create a lead in the CRM system. If a certain customer is there, we hit basically that. We built that also for a customer. That means we are calling in this, let's say, framed operator, we are calling an iFlow with Cloud Platform Data Integration, and then hand the data over that the workflow basically can then do its magic. So it's not replacing anything, it's complementing. And what this pipeline in Data Hub does is much more lower grain and technical than what, of course, such an iFlow and something like that is being done. Within Cloud Platform, there is also the possibility to connect to a variety of connectors. So in the API Hub, we have nowadays what we call open connectors. That's third-party connectivity we put in there. And it gives us connectivity to over 150 sources. This 150 sources is anything. There are a few social media sources. There is Marketo, there is Salesforce, there is Facebook, there is whatever. And what we enabled there, again, is a connectivity from Data Hub via this cloud platform service to all of basically this individual and these different sources. And that is exactly what helps us, of course, to get access to that, and which we are using also in many of the scenarios. And one of the scenario is the one I would like to also to conclude with. It's a scenario where we do some sales forecasting together. So we take C4HANA data, we take Salesforce data, which is basically an opportunity view. If you do that, the first thing you realize is that opportunities and accounts are in the different systems mapped completely differently, right? So you first have to do a lot of cleansing and consolidation work until you can really do something with it. So what we basically build within data pipelines, again within Data Hub, is exactly this scenario where we extract the account information, we extract the opportunity information, we implement a certain mapping, we join it together, and then in the end the results is pushed into Analytics Cloud, where the planning and the forecast is actually happening. So we take over the complex, let's say, pre-processing. This is a rather structured data, it's not so super complex. You could argue where you would exactly do that, but I think it's a nice example which emphasizes exactly on how this is basically looking like. And with this example is now what we also jump in. Whoops, let me see, because that was not working in my system before, so I will show that to you here. And it's basically concluding exactly what you have learned and what we what I showed before. You saw already in the Metadata Explorer, you saw already the way how we can connect to C4HANA. You see all of the available data assets. And if you then switch into cloud platform, this is how this open connector, this API hub looks like. In our demo system, we have 2 of them, let's say, from the sources basically made available. So we made available in our instance here Salesforce and S3. And this is exactly how we then basically use and where we also connect from a metadata perspective. We connect basically to that, and then we build basically this whole process in our, let's say, pipelining environment. That is rather complex, so it's a lot of mapping, a lot of things which you have to do. And once you have that, the simple export of the data, and I think that was even the pipeline I showed you a second ago, would look like that. So we would use this open connector that is behind that operator, and we would write it into S3. That is the scenario. We bring everything into S3, for example, and then conduct basically the mapping. You see the different accounts we dump out, and I would just browse a little bit through that. And once you have done that, mapping of accounts, keep that in your head. Mapping, sales, map accounts. So it would look like that. And that's then the final pipeline. So remember, we connected now via this open connectors to Salesforce and to C4HANA via the ways I showed you before. Then we implemented here a projection basically. Okay, they coded it, but it could also be done. Let me see if I can get into there. But it could also be done in a, let's say, in a graphical way. Basically, that is what is happening here. We do a projection both out of that files, and then we write and we use the joint result and basically write it back to then in the end have a final pipeline which looks like that, which I destroyed before. Oops. Maybe I just screwed up other session. Where you then read this file again and then have basically the push to Analytics Cloud, where you then have later, let's say here, and that is the part which was not working in my demo system, so I would just browse through it, where you then have a dashboard which is basically looking like that, where you then also see the mapping of the different accounts. Again, that could be now very much transparent to Data Warehouse Cloud. It would exactly look the same, where you then basically have a mapping and you have the report shown to that in a real-time fashion. So it's a micro-batching again. Every time there's something new, it will be updated and it will be basically shown here, right? So that means, and that is basically what we want to show, and I just scroll back here. My laptop is now completely crazy, right? I switch too often the screen, I think. So the thing you should take away from this session is exactly that picture, right? So Data Hub helps you, especially with enterprise applications, by having a lot of the services predefined, right? You saw a lot of the stuff I showed you was predefined connectivity to C4HANA, to BW, and so on. If it's not predefined, you can always extend it with coding. Our goal is to have this content-rich scenarios for you, for also partners, and we would like to, let's say, to keep the knowledge of semantics and of the rich knowledge we have in the sources and transport and offer that basically in our different, let's say, applications from this metadata to this pipelining. There are a bunch of sessions here at TehcEd, and still are today and tomorrow, where you can touch basically also all of that I showed you before. The scenario I showed you today is basically a session we are giving as a hands-on session, so you could also build all of that stuff. There is also the sessions around data intelligence, which are more focusing on the machine learning, data science part, but like I said, they are wrapping completely Data Hub. You can use the SLT ABAP functionality out of the box, so please feel free to explore that, to join that journey. Other than that, yeah, thanks for that, thanks for attending, and have a great day.